Hi everyone! In this short workshop, I'm going to talk about emotional eating and metabolism. Now, the reason I wanted to focus on this is because this is a blend between food and nutrition and also emotions and nervous system regulation, which is why I want to talk about emotional eating. Okay? If you struggle with emotional eating, a lot of people think that is something to do with the food or binge eating, okay? Or discipline or willpower, but it really isn't. Emotional eating is actually a brain and nervous system response. So your brain isn't trying to make you fail, it's just trying to help you regulate how you feel. So we're going to look at the stress food loop. When you get stressed, whether that's from a thought, a situation, emotion, the stress response is activated. Stress hormones are released. Okay, so your stress response is that fight or flight mode. Stress hormones are released like cortisol, adrenaline, they're flooded throughout your body. Those hormones trigger cravings. Okay, and you use food as a coping strategy for temporary relief. Okay, you're using food as a comfort blanket, let's say. And then what happens is you eat the food, whether that's an emotional eating session or a binge eating session, then you start to feel guilty because you have binge ate or emotional ate, whatever it is. And then you start thinking and saying to yourself, well, why did I do that? Why can't I stay on track? Or I'm such a lazy fool, whatever you say about yourself. And then the cycle repeats because you get stressed about the thoughts that you have. You get stressed about the fact that you emotionally ate or had a binge eating. Stress cycle starts again. You feel emotional. Guilt is an emotion. Feeling like a failure if you've binge ate. All of these are emotions swirling around your body. And you use the food as a temporary relief. Now, other people might use alcohol as a temporary relief, drugs, exercise to cope with the emotion. So when stress hormones increase because of a stressful scenario or a stressful thought you even have about yourself, that could be a bad body image day, your brain is going to look for fast energy and comfort. So usually, like, you never see people binge eating on healthy food. You never see people binge eating on salads. When you have an emotional eating episode or a binge eating episode, it will always be sugar, carbs, high fat foods because your brain is looking for fast energy and comfort. Comfort as in a comfort blanket feeling. Sometimes that is fullness in your stomach. Sometimes that's just like warm food. If you think about a baby is always comforted by milk, like especially when it's newborn, the comfort is breast milk or bottle feed or whatever. It's the food. Humans have always been relating food to comfort. And when we eat those comfort foods, whatever it is, crisps or takeaway or whatever, but in a lot of food in one go, those foods temporarily increase dopamine and serotonin, which helps your brain feel better and helps you emotionally feel better, especially if it's the feeling of food in your stomach or the feeling of warm food or in your stomach, alongside high sugar, high carbs, high fat foods because of the dopamine and serotonin boost you get from it. Okay? Now, we need to look at your hunger hormones. There's two. One, called leptin, is your fullness hormone. That tells your brain, okay, I've had enough now. I need to stop eating. And then there's ghrelin, which is your hunger hormone, which signals, okay, I'm hungry. I need to eat something. When you are stressed and emotional, being emotional is stress. If you have poor sleep, if you are on a very low calorie diet or have been for a very long time, those things disrupt your hormones. So it doesn't really matter what the stressor or the trigger for stress is, whether that's a poor night's sleep, whether that's a fight with your partner, whether that is being let go from work, whether it's dieting and being too restrictive. Those things disrupt your hormones, as well as if you've had an emotional day, like a fight with your partner, okay? Any sort of stressor, all of these are stressors. Your brain doesn't know, oh, I'm eating too little food, or I've had a fight with my boyfriend, or I hate my boss. Your brain doesn't know which one it is. It just knows stress, okay? And those hormones are disrupted. Your hunger hormones. Stress impacts all hormones, but I'm just talking about food and hunger in particular. And that means that you might feel hungry even when your body doesn't need to actually eat. And if you're restricting food too aggressively, your brain is going to perceive scarcity. And that also increases cravings and obsession around food. So it's, physiologically, you might have enough food to keep you going for the day. You don't need more. But if you have a restrictive eating pattern, psychological restriction increases the want or the desire for that food. So let's say you're eating no carbs or like no chocolate or any sort of junk foods or flexible dieting sort of foods in your day to day. It is very likely that you're going to think more about those foods. So whether this is eating too little, whether you've had an emotional day, whether it's whatever other stressor it is, this is why a lot of women switch between dieting, binge eating, emotional eating, having those feelings of guilt, and the cycle starts again. You start thinking negatively, you start feeling negative emotions as a result of your thinking patterns. You use food as a coping strategy for that emotion, which isn't actually solving the problem, which is the emotion. It's just a temporary reliever. And you have a binge or you have an emotional eating episode, and then you feel terrible an hour or so later, or maybe even a few minutes. And then what happens is you start thinking negatively again, you start feeling even worse, and you will have a binge or emotional eating episode again. Or you might start to restrict your food behaviorally, which is restricting the energy going into your body, and the stress cycle starts again. So it doesn't really matter which one of those things might relate to you. If you're using food as a coping strategy, it's nothing, or as an emotion coping strategy, emotional eating is never about the actual food. It's about the emotion you are trying to solve with that food. So the solution to it is learning how to regulate your nervous system, respond to your emotion, allow your emotion, and build a healthier relationship with not only food, but your relationship with your emotions. So a lot of women, especially Irish women, push down emotions. We feel shameful or embarrassed, or feel like we shouldn't feel emotions. And that is exactly what is going to amplify your emotional eating or your binge eating issues. So you need to learn how to manage stress levels, regulate stress levels, eat balanced meals, and have a flexible dieting approach so that you're not restricting foods that's going to cause even more psychological cravings. You need to learn how to build emotional awareness. So it's not building and building and building so that at the end of the week or whenever it is, you have this, like you're like a boiling pot and you have your emotional eating or your binge eating episode, and how to allow yourself feel those emotions without being hard on yourself. It is normal to have emotions. Acknowledge and allow those emotions, and regulate yourself with breathwork, grounding tools, talking to people, so that you are replacing your emotion coping strategy of food with a healthier emotion coping strategy of actual nervous system regulation. So inside the hub, if you want to learn more about emotional eating, if you are not sure if you are an emotional eater or if you want to learn more about it, if you type in emotional eating into the search bar, here's a lesson on what it is. Here's an assessment you can do. Then you can decide there's different types of emotional eaters. There's a lesson here on how to identify, am I eating out of emotion or am I eating out of physical hunger? Then, if you want to, well, there's so many tools in here to do with emotional eating. So just type in emotional eating into the search bar. This is in the Women's Health Hub. You can learn more in there. And now, if you want to learn how to regulate yourself, you can go in here, click categories, and you can click on guided breathwork sessions. Go to any of the down regulation breathwork sessions, or you might want to try some mindfulness or acceptance and commitment therapy. There is guided sessions in there on how to bring emotions to the surface and release them, because once you can acknowledge and allow and release them, then you're not going to use food as a coping strategy because you're regulating your emotions in a different way with a healthier coping strategy. So if you have any questions on any of this in particular, I love talking about this sort of stuff, especially when it comes to food and how you think about food and your attitude towards food and your behaviours towards food, and then how this impacts your nervous system and your stress response. Then leave a comment in the community and I will get back to you there. Hope you enjoyed this workshop and I will see you in the next video. Bye.